we go. Plant power disruptors. 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 Plants and pigs and veganism advocacy.
We are Plant Power Disruptors. I'm Philly Disruptor.
I'm Dashita Disruptor, and we disrupt.
We're disrupting with love, baby.
And we disrupt the fabric of reality to make the world a better place for all.
Right on.
Today we're really excited because we have this amazing guest with us and our very good friend.
Yeah, so let me introduce him. His name is Saurabh Dalal. He is a dedicated vegan advocate and sustainability expert. He has spent decades promoting a compassionate, plant-based lifestyle through his work with various nonprofit organizations and leadership roles in the vegan and animal rights communities. As an advisory board member of the American Vegan Society and the International Vegan Union, Saurabh is passionate about creating a more ethical, sustainable world by fostering connections between veganism, environmentalism, and social justice.
Well, thank you for joining us, Saurabh.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, the first question we usually ask all of our guests is, how did you become vegan? What made you make this step, and how's been your journey so far?
Right. Well, I was raised vegetarian, and so my parents actually were multi-generational vegetarians, and it was a part of my upbringing. And so I think the values that were instilled in me, that was always a part of who I am. And then I kind of was surprised when I started learning about what happens in our system of food production. And I was really, really shocked. And I just, so much information that was, not presented to us, we just didn't know about it. You really had to seek it out. And when I learned that there's so much exploitation, suffering, killing in, for animals used for animal products like dairy and dairy products, it just made me realize that, I had to make changes in my life and to be more in line with my values. So when I learned those things and I started meeting people and finding out more about groups, it became very easy for me to transition. And I'd say it's probably the best decision I've made for myself. Being vegetarian wasn't my decision. Being vegan was. And I think it's going, amazingly well. I get to meet great people like Phil and Dasha.
All right. Well, you can't scoff at that. Well done. Yes. Well done.
So Saurabh is definitely one of the people who has been longest vegan I've known. I don't know about you, but yeah, definitely.
He's a mainstay of the vegan community.
Definitely a great example for everyone. But with that, I'm really interested to hear, as Phil said, you are on boards of some of the nonprofits or involved with them in some ways. You're advising to them. So how did you decide to get involved with which nonprofits, and what is your choice? How do you choose which of them you want to be associated with?
Sure. I think, for me, I think it's really important to be active at the local level. And so one of the groups that I got involved in earliest was the local vegan group. It's called the Veg Society of DC. And so I think, just doing things at the grassroots level is really important to me. So that was an easy choice. And then just learning more about groups and which ones are really more aligned. There's a lot of great groups, a lot of great activities. And I decided, rather than just doing things individually, which is also important and good, I think helping with organizations, you have a better impact and you can amplify your impact. And so I was really looking for groups that have been around, have been doing things for a long time. So that's how I found the International Vegetarian Union. And one of the people in the local area was the one who introduced me to the group. And so I got involved in the early 90s. And then also the American Vegan Society, because they are the oldest here in North America, founded in 1960. So, they've been doing a lot, and they kind of bring it from a place which is important to me, which is Ahimsa, or nonviolence. And so when I heard about that, I thought, okay, what a great group. And then we were collaborating on different conferences and projects. And so then it was natural for me to become closer to them and then to help them in various ways. So I'd say, part of it because I wanted to be involved at the local level as much as I could do globally. And so therefore the International Vegetarian Union and some of the groups and even the Coalition for Healthy School Food, because they're really working on the school systems and nutrition education and advocacy. So a good friend of mine is the executive director, and she asked me to join the board. So I think I just, sometimes you wander into things, And sometimes you find, different organizations that really resonate. And so that's kind of how I've, come to be involved with some of those groups.
So all the people saying that they can't, I just moved to this town and I can't find any vegans whatsoever. You're just not looking hard enough.
Yeah.
Agree. Absolutely agree. I mean, it's out there. And nowadays, especially because everything is at our fingertips. And so you can find anything you need. And it's easy. And communities are just so common. Like, great groups like Plant Powered Disruptors. And there's vegan meetup groups and Facebook groups. And then other, organizations that are 501c3s. And so I think there's just in New York City especially, any big city has great organizations. Even small towns now are having societies and online groups and all that. So I think you're right. If you are looking for a community, you can definitely find it.
But it's amazing that you were doing it in the early 90s. There was not even there was internet, but not widely available for sure. And I remember myself in early 90s. I would age myself, but I was already a teenager at that time. But I was just reading about vegetarianism through, we're big Beatles, the Beatles fans, and that's how we bonded. And just reading about the Beatles and their story, how George Harrison was really he was really into Indian music and Indian culture. And then through that, I realized, and being somebody who made the connection at 5 years old, but then vegetarian culture was not the part of the culture where I was growing up. And then reading, there is actually all these gurus in India who are actually promoting vegetarianism, and it's just how I encountered that for the lifestyle for the first time. So it's amazing that you were already connecting to all of those amazing impactful organizations.
Yeah.
I remember getting a packet of a thing that talked about different celebrities that were vegan and vegetarian, and seeing a thing with Paul McCartney on it. And I was like, I dig Sir Paul, so maybe he's got something over there. Let me see what he's got going on there.
Sir Paul has done a lot, and as have all the Beatles, so I agree with you. And I will say that, even though I became vegan in '91, I was inspired by people who had done it before me. And so I think it's just, it's a movement, it's a group of people, and people inspire one another. And I meet people all the time who have just recently become vegan, and it's exciting. And so I just think that it's great because I think, it's just great people, and it's a big movement, and it's about everyone and trying to be as inclusive as possible. And I think people inspire one another, and I was inspired by people who've been vegan much longer than I have.
So no gatekeeping over here.
Yeah.
Right. So let me ask you a little question here. Now, you've traveled extensively promoting veganism. How do different cultures around the world approach plant-based diets?
Yeah, I will say that there are differences, and there's different just mindsets, and because I was born in India and I came to the U.S. when I was pretty young, but have strong connections there. And I would say in India, it's kind of a way of life for many communities, for many people. And again, my family and my ancestors, I don't know how many generations back, but I'd say at least probably 10 generations we've been vegetarian. And that's just part of our lives. And so it's kind of who we are, and it's really more holistic. And I feel in the Western world, not that there's good or bad, but I think, sometimes it's not part of who we are, part of our culture, part of our society. So it's almost something that's new and foreign that we're kind of incorporating. And so I think, because, different cultures have done this for such a long time, it's just part of kind of like the fabric of their lives. And as we kind of move through time, we're seeing that happening here too. I think the more people are that way, and they're raising their kids and their friends and their families and all of that too, I think it becomes part of our culture. So culture changes, and it takes effort. And I think we're seeing some really good things, those types of cultural shifts.
I think too many people from back in the old days, the way they used to eat, are now dying off, and people are being able to see the mistakes of that and thinking I don't want to die that young, and maybe I could change. Maybe I can change.
There is natural selection that happens too.
But you have also been to other places as well. I know you traveled to Israel and to some other. So what differences do you see? What is the difference?
I mean, it's kind of hard because it's so different in many, many places. But I think the common idea is that, there's some very basic principles and tenets that are at work, and it's like kindness and compassion is prevalent in so many, cultures and places around the world. And so I think that just kind of manifests itself in different ways. But like Israel, I was there last year, and fortunately before things, got very violent. But it it was just great to see that, there's just so much energy and activism around it. And some people have been that way for a long time. A lot of it's new for people. But again, it's just, it's kind of like times are there and they're right for changes. And, it's the food, it's part of like, their like, their social groups, all of that. And so that's the unique part that I love experiencing is the different foods and the flavors and all that in different places. And that's, a key part of culture. I think bringing people together around food, is really important. And if you can do it in a way that really affirms life, I mean, how beautiful is that?
Well, I think Phil has a special question about food on the
Oh,
topic
no.
of food.
Oh no, which one?
Your
this one?
favorite?
Okay. So I'm
What's
going to ask. Yes. So that's not a question. Oh, the favorite food one.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
he's
that
like
was-
talking
no, that
about
was the last one.
flavors.
All right. So here's the question for you.
Okay.
What would you say? Now, if you had your choice, you could eat anything in the world right now.
Okay.
What would you eat?
I'm going to give a pretty boring answer, but I love pizza.
What?
I love
What?
pizza.
That's not what we
And
expected
I know. But you know what? I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest. Even after this, I'm going to go to get some pizza after
What
this.
the- where's the best
and so
pizza,
this is
best
New York
vegan
City.
pizza?
Well, you guys are here too, and but there's so many places now that have even like vegan cheese available, right? And you can even get it by the slice. And so there's a great all vegan place called Screamer's Pizza. I love Screamer's. It's in Brooklyn. They have Double Zero, which is another all vegan place here in
that's a
Manhattan.
good spot.
And there's a lot of places that aren't vegan, but they have great vegan options. And so NY Pizza Suprema is excellent. And
iPizza. I
you know,
remember
and
there.
iPizza, which is
I got a custom little vegan pizza made.
personal pie.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's very
exactly.
nice.
And so it's really just very easy and possible to do it. And so, but I do like many types of foods. Pizza is just one of the things that I happen to love. But I'm cooking more and more now, and kind of taking some of my mom's recipes and all of that. So I know one of you has at least had an opportunity to try some of my cooking, and so I love making Indian dals. And so different types of lentils, and I'll do mixed dals and using all the Indian spices, like, just beautiful spices like coriander and cumin and some cinnamon. Then you put like garam masala, or you put, red chili powder, and you actually add in, saffron and turmeric. And you kind of bring it together with all the different lentils, and you can like put them in an Instant Pot or a crock pot and just cook them. And you can add in vegetables. I mean, things like that are just amazing. So I'm kind of appreciating a lot of these traditional spices that we use more and more. But I love food and I love eating. And what I'm really just overjoyed with is that today you can find anything veganized. It's easier than it's ever been before. And if anyone asks you, oh, here's something that I doubt there's vegan, I'll bet you will find it.
Yeah, well, I'm always the thing that I really want to find. If I could have anything made vegan, the thing that I would like is an old school Cuban sandwich. You know, the one that they used to use an iron to iron. Like they would make these sandwiches and make it flat. And I was like, that used to be like one of my favorite sandwiches back in the carnivorous days. I would like to see a vegan sandwich made like that.
So they're like paninis, but kind of, even more, but they have the
Yeah.
marks on it too, then, right?
Yeah. It kind of had this garlicky sauce on there, and it was kind of like some sort of, I guess they used pork of some sort, and also like little pickles, and everything was nice and crushed flat with some sort of cheese on it. It was so delicious back then. In the day.
It's going to be veganized.
I want a veganized
It will
version
be
of
veganized,
that.
that.
If anybody knows, if anybody knows a vegan
We
version
should
of it,
find it. I'm pretty sure there is one.
Yeah,
right?
or we
Because
could-
every
Exactly.
single- like my culture is very meat heavy.
Meat-centric?
Yeah, meat centric. But I can make any of the dishes veganized. That's sort of culture.
Dude.
And I can attest the dish he made was really like tasty, delicious, especially spices. And I think like just the combination of the spices, I think was. And you mentioned then it was your mom's recipe.
Yeah,
right? For
yeah,
the spices
yeah.
together. So yeah, so talking about the culture, and you mentioned it already, the influence of the culture and your family's legacy. I know the spirituality is the big part of the culture and of your life in general. So how does it intersect? Is there some connection between veganism, Ahimsa you mentioned, and other like part of your religion, which you
and how can secular people get in on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was raised in the Jain tradition, Jain religious tradition, and so and that's Jain for those who don't know, and it's a religion that was started historically in India, but the tradition goes back prehistorically. So the main thing about Jainism really is it's about principles, and there's 5 main principles. And I was really raised with this, and the principles are Ahimsa, which is nonviolence, Satya, which is truth, Asteya, which is non-stealing or taking only what's given, Brahmacharya, which is purity of mind and body, and Aparigraha, and that's detachment from material things. And so the great thing about this was that these are the principles that, were kind of instilled in us as we were growing up. And so it was just a natural consequence of that to be vegetarian. And then when I started learning more, to become vegan. But, I wouldn't say I'm a deeply religious person, but I feel I am spiritual. I think the values are so important and just beautiful principles that are applicable in every aspect of life. And so I think, my religion is an important part of who I am. And I'm also involved in sort of the Jain community at the local and, international levels. And one of the main things that I do when I give talks about Jainism is connecting with veganism, because it's such a natural connection. And every one of our principles really point to us taking it, as widely as possible in thoughts and words and in actions. And each of the principles really points to a way of living to be harmonious with life, and veganism is a key part of that.
So do you want to mention them? Because I found this, all of those 4 or 5 principles.
Oh, sure.
And how they connect, plugging into the veganism specifically.
Oh, okay. Like I mentioned, Ahimsa, which is nonviolence. And so that's pretty obvious. It's like only, doing the minimization of our harm. And then Satya, which is talking about the truth. And the way I look at that is really about seeking the truth. We should always be open to learning and seeking and understanding. And then once we know this, we need to incorporate that. We need to live the truth. And then there's Asteya, which is taking only what's given. And, a lot of times we look at it as non-stealing, but it's really about asking ourselves, what is our place in the world? And what's really given to us? Or what do we really take? And so I think that's very important. And Brahmacharya, which is really about, in thoughts and words and in actions, about purity of our minds and our bodies. And so Brahmacharya, I think in a way is, we have things done for us. We may not do certain things, but we have things done for us, like dairy, for example. And dairy is really a product of violence, right? We're actually, we're actually controlling and manipulating the reproductivity of other beings. And that's not what they want, but this is what we do. And we do it because we can. And so that's a complete, transgression to a principle of Brahmacharya. And then finally, Aparigraha, which is detachment. And, I will say kind of a mixed emotions on that, because nowadays you can find anything veganized. And whether it's desserts and all that, you don't have to deprive yourself in any way. And Aparigraha is kind of interesting because you were saying, how do you detach from material things? So there's a little bit of a conflict there. But the great thing is, you have the option, and you can also exercise, will and discipline. So those are the 5 key principles. And there are others, but those are the main ones. We call them the Panchprats. And to me, I think they're applicable in every part of my life.
Yeah, and actually Saurabh gives talks at Jain temples on this topic, so which I think is super, even as a person who is not religious, I still even I find them really intriguing and interesting.
I'm glad you were the one who asked me that question, Dasha.
Yeah, of course. We have a lot of conversations about religion.
Yes, we do.
But switching gears a little bit to more material topic, I know you're actually also an investor, and you invest in a lot of vegan companies. So can you tell us a little bit more about how do you choose those companies? What are some principles or criteria which you use, where to invest, and which companies to support?
Sure. Yeah. It's a really big topic, and the one thing I will say is that it's once again a common theme here is it's easier than it's ever been before. It's in the past it's been very difficult, because there aren't a lot of publicly traded companies that are vegan companies, but you're seeing more and more now. And of course, concentrating into a few companies is very, risky. And so people don't advise things like that, but you can make that a part of your portfolio. One of the big awakenings for me was, in the early 90s, I started thinking about, we kind of take, a lot of precautions about how we spend our money. And then it's also about, how we save money. What do you do with the money that you have? But investing has been very difficult. And now there's more and more ways to do that. There are funds that are being set up. They're socially responsible and ESG, which are funds, but they're not always vegan. And so you have to have certain screens on those. But now you have things like ETFs. There's a vegan ETF out there. It's called VEGN. That's the ticker for it, which is a great one. It takes the S&P 500, which is a very broad, diversified, group of stocks, and it takes out all the ones that have anything to do with exploitation of animals and some environmental screens also. And so the great thing is it basically still is a large number of publicly traded companies, but it's the negative screens, which means that if there's a company that's doing harmful things, you take it out. There are other ones that are now looking at positive screens, which are looking at companies that are actually trying to actively displace or do something differently and better. And so there are now funds like the ETFs. There's one out there called EATV, EATV. That's the ticker. That's a great one too. And then you can get involved in individuals. But the thing that I was looking at when I was looking at trying to do some more work in the investment space, a lot of times the regulations are not favorable for the average person. And what I wanted to do was for every one of us to be able to invest in these companies. And so a lot of venture capital and money like that, most people were not able to get into those. But there are things like, say, equity crowdfunding, which is a new development that the SEC has approved, not too long back. And so now you can actually, every one of us can actually invest in companies with small amounts, up to say, $100, $200, $300, up to $2,000 a year.
Wow.
And so you're going to see things like that being new. I'm actually involved in a project. It's not a nonprofit, it is a for-profit, but it's really to make it easier for people to invest and putting money where your values are. And so these early stage companies have a very difficult time getting funded. It's very expensive, and especially in this current environment, it's very difficult. But you're going to see equity crowdfunding being a big thing, like the Vegan Investment Club. And that's ways to learn about companies that are exactly in line with my values. And it's very risky because these companies, are early stage. A lot of them may not make it. Let's hope we can support them and help them be bigger. But you can put it, and then what you need is some of those to actually to make it. And so there's good opportunities through equity crowdfunding. So there's a few different ways. And I just gave a talk recently for the American Vegan Society at their annual garden party. And I actually went into an hour talk about all the different ways that we can actually be more aligned. There's probably no perfect investment, but you can be far more in line than the average investments that most people probably have.
I would love to hear that talk, the 1 hour talk on the investment.
Sure, yes.
Need more education in this area. But we actually had the honor of having Saurabh come and talk at one of our events, which we also host here for New York City community, and he was talking about the climate change, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. So let me throw that out there here. And can you tell us about how veganism connects to sustainability and climate change?
Sure. Well, I think this is an area that's gotten a lot more attention in recent years. And before that, it was really just not, the connections weren't there. So I think the big theme here is that, being vegan is great for us, for our bodies. It's great for the animals, of course, but it's also great for the planet. And there is so much inefficiency and waste that's involved in animal agriculture. And so the great thing is if you're eating, a all-plant diet, for example, right, that's low on the food chain. And the amount of resources that it takes to grow plant foods is so much less. It's so much more efficient than it is to create animal products. And so if you look at things like land usage, you can grow vegan food on less than 10%, probably 5% of the land space that's required if you wanted to eat animal products. If you look at things like water usage, it's also a factor of 10 to 15 globally. You would use 10 to 15 times more water consuming animal products than if you ate plant products, right? Not 10 to 15%, 10 to 15 times. Same thing with grains. If you actually use the grains to feed animals and then you consume those animals, right, that's 10 to 15 times more inefficient than if you ate plant products. And so, whether it's energy usage, it's water usage, it's food in, food out, it's land, those are all so much more efficient in a vegan diet. And then you have the negative consequences of animal agriculture, which is things like pollution. It's land pollution, it's air pollution, it's water pollution. You have chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers that are, because of all that extra food that we're not, using efficiently, all that's used. And then, of course, there's this big, issue now around climate change. And we're learning more and more that, animal agriculture contributes immensely to climate change. And a vegan diet and lifestyle is much, much less. And so the single greatest factor, of carbon equivalent emissions in the world is animal agriculture. And the estimates are anywhere between 13%, excuse me, on the very conservative side, up to studies that show 87% of all greenhouse gas emissions are from animal agriculture.
Wow.
And so it's really mind-blowing when you think about it. And it makes sense. It only makes sense because look at what we have to do in order to raise animals for food, and then to grow them, and then to slaughter them, and then all the downsides of that, not only for the animals, of course, and then for our health, but for the planet. I mean, it's a win-win-win-win-win. The way I look at veganism, it's like no one really loses. Everyone gains. We just have to think differently. We have to shift things a little bit differently. But it's powerful. And there's some great documentaries and some great books being written about this, and the connections are mind-blowing.
What's your favorites?
Well, one of the great films around environmentalism is Cowspiracy. And Cowspiracy really did a great job of kind of connecting that, and then also why a lot of mainstream environmental organizations don't talk about it. And really, a lot of it's because of the funding. And it's actually not beneficial to a lot of mainstream groups to talk about this because it's going to alienate a lot of their followers. And so, but we're seeing more and more information, and some of your traditional environmentalists and environmental groups aren't really speaking about it, but they're getting so much backlash and pressure now as we as a movement grow. And so I think, we're going to see, more and more of these connections. And you're seeing this already. Certain governments, certain leaders are now seeing this and saying, this only makes sense, not only for an individual, but even collectively as a society. And so, we're seeing this shift in mindset and awareness that's actually going to translate to government policies and all that. I think this is just a matter of time.
Even in America? Because I get nervous because a lot of that I'm afraid of just corporations just like, let's keep that hush-hush. Let's not talk about these things. And that's what's going to come to my next question here, because we're talking about debunking myths. So, we hear all these things that are said, and then things are covered up with lies, things like that. So what are some of the common myths that you are able to just dismiss and be like, for people that are out there trying to talk to people, try to talk to family, try to talk to friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of myths. I think, as you've been, vegan for a long time as well, and so you hear these things, right? How do you get your protein? How do you get your calcium?
How do you get your protein?
Exactly. I think those are, commonly understood now, where you can get protein from all foods as long as you eat a varied enough diet and eat enough calories to support and maintain your weight. Even with calcium, the most bioavailable sources of calcium are leafy green vegetables, right? And so you can get calcium through many, many sources. I think some of the big ones
Tofu has estrogen in it. I can't have that.
Exactly. It's got small amounts, but I think if you eat it in normal quantities, there's no harm. There's great studies that have been done about this. So there's a lot of those myths, that estrogen myth too.
Yeah, that estrogen myth is it's not even animal. It's not animal estrogen, so it doesn't affect us.
It's phytoestrogen, which is what comes from plants. And it's, chemically similar, but the amounts you would have to consume are so high, no one would even get to that level. So I think it's another big myth. I think one of the really just easier ones is that, vegan food is boring, and it's like, I'm going to miss all of these other things. But my view is that, the more people who transition, their whole universe of food options opens up. And so they actually have a new universe of options they never knew about. All the different fruits, all the different vegetables, all the different grains. And so it's not really limiting. You're actually increasing, because you learn about so many more, cultures, and then their food traditions and their spices and the way they prepare and techniques. And so I think one of the biggest myths today is that, it's going to be boring and it's going to be limiting. Yeah. I think it's the opposite.
How much rambutan have people? What about some dragon fruit? What about all these other things you never even thought of about before?
It's amazing, how much there is out there. And we're seeing more and more because now the world is a smaller place and we have access to information. And so I think that's changing a lot of things too. So yeah, there are so many myths, but I think, you brought up a good point, Phil, which is, governments play a strong role in all of this. And we as individuals, have to be active, right? We have to help change. It's whether it's people we vote in, or it's different, initiatives for support, or there's a lot of times open comment periods that the USDA, for example, will have, and it's deciding our food policy.
Yeah, people are getting paid off here. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly. And so we have to kind of take this into our hands, and we as individuals, we have to combine and unite as groups, but really kind of speak out. And when there's comment periods about the dietary guidelines, or if it's the food pyramid, we have to come in individually and as groups, which we are doing, and actually making our voices heard, because diet is actually so poor that it's actually killing people, and we have the power to basically empower people and to make people healthier. And it's simple. We don't have to go into these, drugs and different, methods in order to cure people. We
Some
can
of them
do
are
this
doing
from
that on
what's on our
purpose. They're
plate.
doing that on purpose because they want they are making you sick and then selling you the cure.
Exactly. There's a film called They're Trying to Kill Us. And that's exactly
Great film.
the point you just brought up. And it's really about communities that are less advantaged. And they're the ones who are really exploited the most. And so some great documentaries. They're Trying to Kill Us,
I highly
Invisible
recommend it.
Vegan. I mean, communities of
Oh,
color.
that was a great one,
and all
too.
of that, are probably the most affected. And they're the ones that, probably need this information as much as anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about communities, and I think you mentioned it a little bit, you touched on this a little bit in the beginning. So for those people who are like in the beginning of their vegan journey, or they have been vegan, but they don't have a lot of people to turn to. So what is your recommendations? I know that we met at actually NYC Vegan and Vegetarian Meetup,
Yes.
which prides itself in the big numbers here in New York City, but other cities have communities as well. So is there, do you have any recommendations for people how to start and find those groups and with which they can, where they can find them like-minded people, and they can also become active?
Right.
To
Right.
address,
Well, it's a great question, because one of the common things you hear is, I'm the only vegan I know, or I was the only one I knew, right? And so it's really important, right? And the first thing I would just say is that, at least what I can share is that you're not alone, right? There are many of us out there, right? And even in small towns, as well as, of course, the big cities, right? So one is, you're not alone. How do you find those people, right? And to your question is that, online groups, if you have access, which most people do nowadays, right? So whether it's Facebook groups, there's Facebook groups everywhere around veganism or animal rights. There's meetup groups, right? There's probably actual organizations. If you're, say, a student, right, there's probably something on campus that's either a veg club, an animal rights group, a sustainability group. All these are like-minded, right? So if you're a student, I think you can probably find one. And if you don't, then it's time for you to start one, right? So that's one of the things,
Nice.
right? Someone's always got to be there, right? So if it's not there, doesn't exist, I'm going to say that probably exists. If it doesn't, you're the person we need to start that group, right?
If not you, then who?
yeah.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, Dasha, I mean, so many great organizations and groups. And whether it's a 501c3 nonprofit that's registered, or it's a group of people that get together, right? If you go to health food stores, if you go to some restaurants that are a little more progressive restaurants, you can probably put little, signs or board things, on the boards and do that. So I think, I think today it's easier, and especially the younger people, they can find information right away. And so I think the big thing now is, you are absolutely not alone. There are people probably very close to you that you'll meet, and you just have to take the initiative. And if you don't, just Google organizations, get involved. I think your other point, Dasha, was really important, which is being active, right? It's great for us to do this, right? But it's even better if it's possible for us to be involved in helping more people, right? And when we help people, it's a win-win-win-win-win. We're helping ourselves, our bodies, our minds. It's like that spiritual energy we have. It's helping the planet. It's helping the animals. And it's also people like yourselves who are saying, I didn't know any other vegans. You know what? You're going to be the one who's going to be the connector and bringing people together. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of possibilities.
I love your advice. Start yourself. If you don't find any of the groups within your proximity, why don't start it yourself?
And other people are going to find you, and they're going to be like, oh my God, thank you for doing this.
Right on. So, well, let me ask you, as you, as a vegan advocate, what challenges have you faced in the situations, and how have you overcome them?
It's a good question. I think, we all face challenges, and part of it is that, if this is something that really becomes a part of you, you're very passionate about these things, right? I know all of you are as well. And part of it is just kind of dealing with the slow process of change. And, we feel like, okay, if you give enough good information out there, people should get it. They should just take that information and they should make those changes. And it doesn't always happen that way. Some people it does, and
One
fantastic.
step forward, 2 steps back.
Right, right. And so, part of it is this whole community building, right? Having people, and so that, you come and you get it in doses, whatever's right for you. And so I think, what I'm learning is that, it doesn't happen overnight. Some people it does, but a lot of people it doesn't. And they have other challenges in their lives and all that. So what do we do to help bring the barriers down? And how do we help people along the way? And that's why these groups are, as you mentioned, why they're so important, because it's the community. And people want to be a part of a community. When they feel comfortable, and if it's a welcoming community, it's a friendly community, they want to be more involved. And that's going to help them, because everyone can't do it overnight. As we say, that everyone can't go cold tofurkey, right? It's going to take some time. And so, I think these groups are really important, and that's how you overcome some of the challenges about this, because, not everyone can do it, but we have to constantly be there. And because, I feel comfortable doing it, you feel comfortable doing it, we can help others, right? And so one of the big challenges is that, why isn't it happening? Well, it's not easy. And the whys are important, but also the hows, and how do you do it? So another one of the things now is like, how do you help someone become vegan? Where do they shop? What do they cook? What recipes do they need? All of those things, right? And so now there's more and more resources around that. There's Kickstart programs. There's, 21-day transition programs. Everything's available online. Recipes are free. You can get them online. And so I think, the difficulty with information is overcome just by the fact that we have, it's a community, it's a world that's now linked, through the internet. And I think we just have to kind of stay positive. And it's easy to get down and to be, because we're really facing some really serious issues here. The planet, is being devastated. Animals are being massacred. They're being killed. Humans are suffering, right? And so it's a huge problem. And I think one of the biggest challenges is, how do you stay positive? And the way is, you basically make connections with really great people, and you work together. And I tell you, there's nothing better. I think that's been the biggest bonus for me, is that, doing this and being vegan and being involved in groups, I meet amazing people, and they become like my close friends. And so I think, it's actually nurturing. It's a nurturing process.
Right on.
Yeah, I think it's like you're raising such an important point here in terms of like, we as an activist, we face so much disappointments and so much like difficult conversations and pushback from the society when you're doing all of those stuff, and if you like lead a life where you're surrounded by many vegans, you go somewhere on the street with your family or with your coworkers, and you again, there's only vegan in the room, and it's really like, I think it's very easy, as you said, to get disencouraged as well.
And
I
get
know
burned out.
A lot of activist movement actually are talking about it. So I was at the Al Gore's workshop, climate reality workshop, and it was actually like, his argument was like, take the energy from the work itself, not so much as a result, if you don't see it like immediate result, but take the energy from the work you are doing, kind of this bringing some mindfulness, I guess, and awareness in what you are doing. So what do you think about the future? Like, are you positive about the future? Are you excited? Are you like, do you think we're still going to make a lot of progress in the near, whatever, few decades, or maybe even less or more, even if we don't see immediate change as activists?
Yeah.
Optimistic.
Yeah, I'm an optimist. And to me, I actually think that we've done a really good job. Now, there's so much more work to be done, no question about it, right? So there's a lot that we have to do still, without any doubt. But I look back and I say to myself, look at where we were, a decade ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and where we are today. I mean, people know what veganism means, especially in the Western world. That term is pretty common. And, now, if you'd gone, say, 20 years ago to a restaurant, a lot of people would be like, oh, vegan, what is that? Is that vegetarian or not, right? Today, I think a lot of people are much more aware. I think the movement in general has done a great job of making that awareness, that understanding of things much, much better. You look at the products that are out there. So many vegan products. I mean, I'm almost challenging people to say, tell me a product that you think cannot be veganized. And I'm going to tell you it's probably there somewhere, right? So the products are out there. Look at the publications, books that are published, the videos that are out there, movies and films. You'll probably see, in mainstream films, the mention of something around vegetarianism for short, and probably around veganism, right? And so you mentioned Paul McCartney, right? One of the things I love is, The Simpsons, right? In The Simpsons, Lisa became a vegetarian because Matt Groening and Sam Smith, they wanted Paul McCartney to be on the show. And Paul McCartney said, the only way I'm going to do that, which is another beautiful thing about Paul McCartney, how much he's done. He said to them, I'll come on your show. You got to make one of your characters vegetarian and remain vegetarian. And that's how Lisa Simpson became vegetarian. And Apu, who's on the show, is actually vegan, an Indian dude. So, hey. So anyway, but no, we're seeing this everywhere.
Now voiced by
to me,
Indian dude.
yes, it was. But I think that we've done a good job, and I'm a little more concerned about people in the movement actually thinking that we're actually not doing well. And that's what I worry about. I think the average person, if you're out leafleting or if you're out talking to people at fairs and festivals or whatever else, people in general are much more positive today about it than they were, years back. And so overall, I think we just need to keep going, accelerating, bringing more people into the movement. Every type of person, age doesn't matter, color doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, however you identify. We need to have everyone, anyone who wants to be vegan, we need to get them out there and promoting it into their communities, reaching out and all that. I'm positive. I'm very optimistic. I think things are going to continue to get better. We're going to face a lot of challenges along the way. It's not going to be a straight line up. We're going to have a lot of ups and downs, which we're seeing now too. But overall, I'm an optimist. I see so much great progress. The state of veganism today is much, much stronger than it was a decade ago or 20 years ago. I think it's going to continue. And it's going to continue because we're all going to continue being a part of it. And we're on the side that's really looking at problems of the world and what are the actual solutions, not just treating symptoms and not ignoring the problems. This is like fundamentally, a important movement which is looking at root causes and solutions and being open-minded to whatever those answers are.
Right on. So you're like normalizing it now. Yes.
Yes, and I think it is more normal today. I mean, even, in your world, you've probably seen it compared to what it was, when you first started. It is more accepted. It's more understood. And if you talk to people, people are always like, oh, oh, you're vegan. Oh, my nephew or my niece or so-and-so. They always know someone who's doing that or had done that or whatever. So whole different world today.
They have a point of reference, but I also mentioned something very important, that we need everyone, and also I think we need like very different types of activism as well. So
Right.
I know we have this discussion like we don't like, Phil doesn't particularly like torture porn,
I hate torture porn.
yeah.
but then it's also important because that actually has the influence as well on people,
Yeah.
and also like you mentioned
Yeah.
leafleting, and a lot of people doing completely different things. Some use music, art, comedy to promote veganism.
Fantastic.
Some doing serious talks. Some people like go and do protests and disruptions in the stores. And I think that's all like very different options, but everyone can find something which relates to them. versus-
Yeah.
I think that's the point too at the
Find your
end, which is
niche.
that there's so much out there. Every discipline, it can sort of be there. And so therefore, whatever really resonates with you, you can find that and you can explore that. And so I think all those things you mentioned are what's the change that's happening in the movement. It's more diversified, whether it's people, it's activities and all that. So, and you may not have been interested in something, but you might be interested in something else. And that's where your passions will be. And that's what, we should pursue.
Right on. Like I knew this dude. He's like kind of shy, kind of bookish, and does his thing. But he was a real talented artist. I think that's Alan, right? But he did some really great activism art, and then he puts it out there, puts it out on his Instagram channel, and it's like great stuff getting retweeted and stuff like that. But now I'm going to ask you a little fun question, if I can.
Oh,
I want everybody
okay.
close your eyes, and everybody think carefully. And if you could have dinner with any famous vegan, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Wow.
All right. So, are you still thinking there?
I'm
there,
thinking
Sean?
there.
All right. So then let me ask. Have you thought of your answer?
Dashita, let's hear.
Yeah. You guys
You
hear?
know my answer.
No, go ahead. Oh, I know who it's gonna be.
Oh wait,
Go ahead.
What's who's?
I'd like to have a dinner with a physicist, Brian Greene.
Oh,
I
yeah.
He's not
knew
a
it.
particular activist, but he's vegan and he is
Yes.
a physicist, and he's doing great work of like popularizing very difficult concepts in physics. He's definitely
She loves his brain.
Well, power to the physicist. I'm a physicist too. So.
Right on.
We haven't talked about that.
That's
All
right.
right. So who would you want to have dinner with?
You know, this might sound just a little like, obvious, but okay, living, I think I would love to have dinner with Paul McCartney.
Right on.
And because, like you, and I have also been a fan of the Beatles, not as big as you guys, but, just the fact that not only here's an 80-plus-year-old guy who's been doing this for so long, and he's impacted so many people. I would just love to hear directly from him. And also, I would love to know what's been his challenge to be vegan, right? Because he hasn't really become vegan. There's some theory that maybe he was vegan for a short time, but he's really been vegetarian for such a long time, which is amazing. And he's done such great work, right? One of the conversations would probably be, oh, Paul, just curious, what has kind of like prevented you? What has been the obstacle for you?
Right.
And so, of course, I wouldn't want it to be offensive in any way whatsoever, because he's done more for, veganism in the world than most people have. But I am kind of curious about that. So maybe that would be my answer, saying why. And that's the reason why I think I'd want to do that.
I actually heard him mentioning once that it's cheese for him.
What? There's so many good cheeses out there.
Exactly. So even the great Sir Paul can probably benefit from experiences that we have here.
He could invest in some good cheese companies.
Yes, he can. Well, one of his ex-wives is vegan, Heather Mills, and
his daughter as well.
oh yeah, maybe, yeah.
And his wife Linda had a great
the cookbooks and all that. I think they were
Yeah.
vegetarian as
And,
well.
had a
But
successful food
Heather
company.
Mills had a food company too that was a vegan food company and all that. So anyway, yeah. So he's done a lot. I mean, he's amazing. But I'd love to have dinner with him just because he's a great guy, and secondly, is kind of curious. What the obstacle was.
Talking
Cheese.
about cheese alternative though, like what do you think about, and also as a person who invests in the companies as well, like all these protein alternatives which is out there. I know you're not a big fan of fake meat specifically, but what is like your view? Do you think it will at some point replace just like animal products, or how are you seeing it today?
Well,
One more round of mad cow disease, I bet I'll bring it out.
Right. Yeah, we don't want, sadly, cows to die in mass like that either. But I think, so the first thing is that I don't eat a lot of mock meats, but I love the fact that they're there, and I'm so happy that people do enjoy them, and they've gotten so much better as well. And so I think that's a great trend. And that's another reason why I think we're actually doing so well as a movement, with companies like that. I do think that it's, at least my thought is that these products are great for those who are transitioning. If you're eating meat today and you realize that meat is really bad for so many reasons, right? And if I don't want to make a big deal about it, I can just find a replacement product and eat that instead, whether it's an ingredient in a food or it's a burger patty or whatever it is, right? Simple, easy, no fuss. It's a pretty straightforward thing to do. And you're not going to be any worse off, and you're probably going to be healthier, right? And so don't let the industry kind of fool you into thinking that, oh, these products are terrible and they're processed. Meat is heavily processed. It's horrible, right? And these products are so much better across the board. So I think that's one of the things we have to also remember. But these companies are going to get better. Food technology, this is a big area of research that's really improving things so much, is vegans who are in food technology, and they're actually creating better products, right? The texture, the mouthfeel, the flavors, the taste, and all of that stuff, is they're just doing amazing things, and it's only going to get better over time. AI being brought in and taking all the data that's out there and kind of figuring out new combinations. I mean, it's amazing what's happening. Is there any question that these products are going to displace the animal products? In my mind, there's no question whatsoever. It's a question of how fast it's going to happen and what's going to be the big thing. Like Phil, you mentioned mad cow disease. Sadly, we as a population, as a society, we need some catastrophes in order to wake us up, right? And so I hope it's not that. I hope it's a gradual process where people start realizing it's much cheaper, it's much better for you, it's much better for the planet, all these other reasons why. But I think it's going to happen. I think the companies are getting, better funded. I think they're learning more. And there's trial and error. There's a lot of, companies that are going to fail, sadly, but a lot of new ones are going to come up, and the products are going to continue to get better. No question about it.
Well, I see some stuff where sometimes there's some religious person will turn around and say, well, people that eat this kind of alternative meat aren't going to get into heaven. Or I'm like, what the heck am I listening to? Like the things that people are saying in order to, whatever their motivation to get people not to eat these things, or they're using fear to make people run away from these things. So.
Everyone has a bias, right? Everyone has a bias. And I think what our bias is that we want to empower people with information, right? We
Mhm.
want people to be more informed to make better choices, right? That's our bias, right? There's no other bias. It's not like I have some, interest in otherwise in getting you to do this, right? I mean, really, it's more about how do we actually get people to think critically, to be open-minded, and look at solutions.
Meanwhile, some of these other people are getting paid off by the industries,
Yeah.
and then you think
Exactly.
of their motivations or who's in their pockets. All right.
Yeah, to Phil's point, because both meat and dairy industry get so much subsidies from the government,
Mhm.
they're definitely seeing a threat in the
Yes,
activist movement.
absolutely.
And I read, like, they published the whole articles. They really, like, follow. They send actually their delegates to the animal rights conferences, which I found
Saboteurs and all
Yeah.
that,
really
yes.
They
interesting.
hire
Just-
scientists to work for them
Yeah,
to,
just
to disprove.
basically, find the trends. So yeah, I think that's unfortunately the sad reality. But also you mentioned, Saurabh, that they also impact a lot of communities. So it's not like it's definitely the issue which goes just beyond animal rights. So are there any other like social justice movements or efforts which you are specifically passionate or care about or supporting? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't spend as much time, but I think it's all part of the same, same idea, same ideology, right? I mean, oppression is oppression, whether it's animals, whether it's humans, whatever it is. And so, I mean, I think many of us probably understand and believe that. And it's really sort of where do we put our time? And we have limited time, we have limited resources. And so for me, I've kind of put as a focus working sort of in the vegan world and on animal rights issues. That's kind of my focus because for me, that just resonated from the beginning. And I think it's also one of the ones it's a little harder connection for people to make, It's like, but everyone's different. And I think it's whatever your passions are. So although I don't do as much work in some of those, I try and support organizations or activities. But I'm so glad so many other people are really passionate about those, and they really do them. But I think at its base, fundamentally, it's really about justice and really and we kind of know what's relatively good or what's relatively not good. And so all of these things that we're looking at, it's really kind of figuring out how do we respect one another? How do we be compassionate? How are we kind? And how do we do things that are relationships that are nurturing and building? And I'm glad that, you all are doing an event that's going to be, this, cross, different areas and cross-sectionalism. And so, I mean, that's great, and it's important. And we have to connect. This is how we're going to make these collaborations and partnerships with others, is that they're going to learn about our issues, we're going to learn about their issues, we're all going to be better because of it.
Right on. And that kind of leads into this thing I'm asking about for the future, for the people, the youth, the people that are the next generation. Oh, yeah, look at the shirt there. You're
Yes.
talking about the
Yes.
vegan, the next generation.
Yes,
What is
exactly.
your message for the next generation? How would you pass the baton to them to inspire them to carry on this kind of work? How?
Yeah. Well, I think people are just really energized and motivated. And I would say all, we can do is help in whatever ways we can, Made a lot of mistakes, right? And maybe sharing those and saying, here's what I've tried, and this is kind of what's not worked. I mean, the only way I've learned really is the things that I've done wrong, and I've decided, oh, that didn't work. I got to do something a little differently, right? And maybe sharing that with them, with younger people. I think younger people are very bright. They're, energetic. They have so much information at their disposal. I think all we can do is to kind of help them, with our experiences and maybe, helping them with some resources that might, move them forward. And I would say in terms of passing the baton, it kind of goes back to this thing what we were talking about earlier. We need everyone, and it doesn't matter what age they are, right? So rather than maybe even passing the baton, it's really more like sharing how we're going to move this thing forward, right? Because we need everyone, whatever backgrounds, whatever your preferences are, to be involved. And
All
the
hands
other
on deck.
and the other thing I would say is that, you're not alone, right? And you have the ability to do so much, right? And we have more abilities today because of our information and knowledge, ability to have knowledge and gain knowledge, that we have more ability to do things than we've ever had before. So
Yeah,
that's
join
my
the
thought.
movement.
Here,
Absolutely.
get involved, get
Yes,
into it.
yes. Whatever your passions are, find a way, bring it in, and
Use your
let's make,
superpowers.
yes, let's make it happen.
Right on. So, ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Saurabh Dalal, who's been totally killing it here.
Great,
No,
thank you.
in the best way, not in a bad way. Like we're used to like putting these things in our language. This killing it.
It's
This
the
is-
language.
you know,
It's
not much. We
language is
gotta start
important. Words
undoing
are
that.
important.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
the other day, I was saying, oh, somebody killed two birds with one stone. Like, hey, you could say,
Right.
feed two birds with one scone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes,
just like we got to
exactly.
start changing those things. We've
There are
been so
websites that have
brainwashed.
like the sayings that are sort of counterproductive to the ones that are like beautiful and like positive. So yes,
Nice.
you can see those too. But thank you for having me. I
Well,
really
it's-
appreciate you
Well,
all
thank
for
you
what
for
you
being
do,
here.
and this was great. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you so
Round
much
of
for
applause.
coming.
Seriously,
It's
wonderful.
Thank you.
great
Thank
having
you.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Plant power disruptors interrupt the fabric of reality, challenging the status quo so you can see. Speaking up for animals by disrupting. Plant power disruptors, plants and pigs and veganism advocacy. Here we go. Plant power disruptors, 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 plants and pigs and veganism advocacy.